10 years ago, observability, there was no such thing as observability. It was SIM, logging, APM, infrastructure management, tracing. There are 5, 6 discrete categories. And then all these companies. And then all of these things were their individual swim lanes. And we're going to build these amazing companies in individual swim lanes. 10 years later, it's called one category, observability. So what was the TAM? Well, we had all these individual TAM, but this TAM has been like commingled and it's coalesced in a very different thing. And the competitive set is very different, radically different. So in general, what I say is companies come in and tell me, I got this massive TAM. I immediately zone out. And then I say, let's deconstruct this. What are you really saying? And then once you deconstruct the truth, then you realize that's not the real TAM.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Sage advice, Fat Joe. Sage advice. Welcome to Run the Numbers, where I interview world-class CFOs, operators, and the investors who fund them on how to get the most out of your company's performance. This podcast is a playbook of sorts for ambitious people in the world of finance, strategy, and ops. Today, my guest is Tony Kim of BlackRock, one of the most prominent tech investors in the world. Tony has been running BlackRock's global technology funds since 2013, managing $20 billion in assets under management. Woo! Tony has the green light to invest anywhere in tech, from mid-cap to large cap to international to private. He has a front row ticket to the game. The top bankers in America bring the best tech companies through his office, so he has perhaps the best read on what good looks like in any macro cycle. Tony and I break down the components of durable revenue, touch on the importance of having a strategic narrative at your company, and do some math on how many IPOs the markets can possibly digest in a year. Tony has a contrarian take on TAM, net dollar retention, and ARR, so if you've ever touched a pitch deck, I wouldn't want to miss this. By the way, are you shocked I got this guy on the pod? Yeah, me too. So sit back and enjoy this jam session with a titan of the tech world. But first, a few quick words from our sponsors. As a SaaS CFO, I know firsthand how difficult it is to report on SaaS metrics. We've all seen a deal close at the end of the month, but the customer's contract doesn't actually start until the middle of the next month, creating the classic discrepancy between bookings or committed ARR and actual ARR, the real stuff. That's why I'm so pumped to be partnering with Maxio, a company trusted by thousands of SaaS companies to understand these reporting nuances. They basically built and automated the SaaS dashboard I tried to manually cobble together for 3 years. In 2022, SaaS Optics and Chargify combined to become Maxio, the only billing and financial operations platform that was purpose-built for B2B SaaS. They're helping SaaS finance teams automate billing and RevRec, manage collections and payments, and put together investor-grade reporting packages. Visit maxio.com/runthenumbers to learn how Maxio can help you supercharge financial operations in 2024. Request a demo using the Run the Numbers link and receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. That's maxio.com/runthenumbers. Reduce burn, extend runway, do more with less. Operational efficiency. These are all catchphrases that we know all too well because of the headwinds business leaders face in today's growth environment. Growth is now a battle, not a breeze. While teams are on the front lines fighting every day for top-line yardage, there are hidden savings opportunities right beneath their feet. That's where Tropic comes into play. Their procurement platform brings order and process to a historically decentralized and chaotic business function: purchasing and supplier management. Tropic serves as the front door for procurement that your entire company will want to use. By combining intake forms, pricing benchmarks, approval workflows, and supplier management all in one place, Tropic makes savings opportunities easy to find and act on. When you pour blood, sweat, and tears into revenue growth, doesn't it make sense to protect what you have fought for? Visit tropicapp.io/metrics to learn how modern businesses are controlling spend to extend their runway. Your board will thank you. Your budget will thank you. Your bottom line will thank you. Tony, honored to have you on the pod today. Thanks for joining me.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
So, Tony, I'm going to throw a term at you, and I'm hoping you can provide some context. So, durable revenue is one of those phrases that's thrown around a lot by CFOs on public earnings calls. How do you even define durable revenue from your perspective as an investor? Are you able to describe it for us and maybe deconstruct the components?
Yeah, let's just deconstruct it. What is the definition of durable, right? It's something that is withstanding wear, pressure, damage, decay over time. It exists for a long time, doesn't deteriorate, permanence, stability. So I would say you extract all of that. There is one underlying intonation here. It's duration. But with software companies, there's a contractual stickiness to it. So everything is subscription. Like there is no, oh yeah, we're software, therefore we're great. You cannot contractually engineer durability. Yes, you can contractually do it for 2 years, 3 years, 1 year, whatever. But there's something more to it than just this duration or contractual duration. So just because you're a software company, it doesn't mean anything about durability to me. Yeah, you can have some limited duration because you have, but if your product doesn't have these other attributes of stickiness, of gravity, of permanence, then you're not what I would call truly durable. And then there's a third element. All software companies are, oh, we're great, we're SaaS. Again, that's not really the point. The point is it's duration, stickiness, and growth. So just because you're durable doesn't mean anything. You notice that because we're subscription companies, we're somehow impervious to these business cycles. And I'm like, you have these cyclical companies in tech, quote, cyclicals, right? Semiconductors, right? And oh, well, when the semi cycle goes down, these companies collapse, growth rates collapse. Okay, yeah, that happens. The same thing happened in software. Now, the thing is, what happened in software is you had companies growing 50% in 2021, and now they grow 10. It's still durable, but the stocks are down as much, if not more, than those cyclical companies. So you can't hide behind this concept of durability. It's durability in the context of these factors of how permanent are you as a solution? What is the growth rate, right, of this thing? Because you have contractually created some notion of duration. And so there's a combination of all these things that factor in. Because like every software company on earth, therefore, is durable. Wrong. That's not true.
Tony, when a company pitches you, what are the top 2 or 3 criteria then that you look for to ensure it has durable revenue potential? Can you tell by maybe its net dollar retention rate? Is that one of the telltale signs?
I was deceived. We were all deceived. Yeah. The NRR concept is all great when things are going great, which was like 2019 to 2021.
Everybody was 140%.
140,
NRR.
150, 160, 130. Right. And to me, NRR is not a predictive thing of anything. It is a manifestation of the today. Oh, our business is good now. Our NRR is 140. You notice that those same companies at 140 now have an NRR of 105.
Yep.
Okay, but hold on a second. I thought it was a God-given right that my NRR was 140. Therefore, it tells you how great we are as a company. But I think we commingle these concepts of a great economic cycle, or it's also a point in time. When you're a $150 million company, your NRRs are 140, 150, 160. You notice that the big companies like Microsoft, Salesforce, they don't tell you the NRR anymore because it's probably like 100, 105.
Why does it become harder then as you get bigger?
So you get bigger. So the NRR is really a reflection partly of the current economic cycle you're in. Things are great. Our NRR is 140. Or NRR is 140 because we're a tiny little company and we're adding these features and we're growing really quickly. So the NRR is great when you're small. But when you're big, you stop disclosing NRR.
Yeah, you just say if it's above or below your benchmark, whatever that means.
That is. And that's inflation, price increase, maybe it's a little bit more seats, et cetera. So to me, that's just like not a critical element. I guess the potency of that metric has just been so diminished, in my opinion. It doesn't really tell you that much more than what you can already tell from bookings or revenue growth or whatever these things. And that gets to the ARR concept. ARR is you're doing my math for me. You're juicing your number because you take the quarterly revenue times 4. I can't do that math myself. Yeah. You got 25 million in quarterly revenue. Now ARR is 100. Therefore, the companies look a lot bigger.
Right.
And then the ARR definition, I'm taking it from March 31st versus January 1st. So the March 31st number is bigger. I'm going to multiply that by 365. There's a difference in how you calculate ARR, NRR, exiting ARR. There's lots of ways to skin the cat. And that, again, is basically a reflection of let's just inflate the number, make ourselves look bigger. Because you notice that in public software companies, They trade on revenue, GAAP
Right.
revenue. But in private software, it's multiples of ARR. But somehow like that whole thing has to translate into GAAP revenue when you go public. But when you're private, okay, let's just take the best possible approximation and then let's juice that on top of with these big NRR numbers when you're a tiny little company. And so I need to look through all of that and say, guys, come on, this is nonsensical.
I always say, if you want to trick your investors, tell them about your car. Contractual ARR. So you do the exit value of what's committed and hasn't even showed up yet. But then, like you're saying, if they're smart and do their due diligence, they're like, wait, why is the gap between revenue and ARR growing over time? This makes no sense.
Yes. These are all little clues that you can extract. Yes.
Tony, so if that's not a component of durable revenue growth, how do you size it up then? Is it a reflection of TAM? Is that what's most important in your mind?
We can get to TAM in a second. I think durability is a function of these other qualitative concepts to me. The dominance, the stickiness, the absolute necessity, and the amount of competition. And is there a lot of gravity, system of record, data gravity to what you're selling? And there are many examples of this. Obviously, I think, Microsoft Office, like it's going nowhere, right? Bloomberg, for us finance guys, that has tremendous durability. It is going nowhere. Everyone's using it. So there's these other elements, to me, help define durability. Because you can have some app, and let's say I have a 2-year contract with this subscription app, let's say it's a note-taking application, or I'll give you an example. I'm not going to name the companies, but all these collaboration work management tools. I've gone through 4 of them in the last 6 years. I started with one, went to another one, went to another one. It's subscription, it's SaaS, it's durable, right? No, that's not durability. Bloomberg, though, I've been doing this 25 years. I've had Bloomberg for 25 years. That's durability. That's not a metric or KPI. This is a qualitative assertion of what has this durability, withstand the test of time. That is what I think is durable. Oracle database. No matter what, it's still there. That's how I would define it. Yeah.
I joke that you have a better chance of replacing the office carpet than you do replacing NetSuite in a 5-year period.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Tony, for the benefit of listeners, what does gravity mean?
Oh, now you're getting into physics. Okay. All right. But
not that gravity, like data gravity.
Yeah. To me, you hear this term now, especially in the world of AI, right? Data has gravity.
I don't know what they're saying, though.
Yeah, I think it's going to this concept that there are things that have a weight to them that, like you said, can't get pulled out, that it's so embedded. And it's also very entangled in with everything else in the organization. The integration and entanglement.
That's a good word, entanglement. Yeah, like a CRM or something.
The roots of the tree have gotten everywhere. And to me, we have all of this data that's sitting there. We have the system of record that's been so entangled in organization. In a way, that's some of the gravity I think people talk about. And then, with AI, you have all these systems of records and pools of data that are just sitting there, hard to get out. And then you bring AI in on top of that. And to me, that's how I would connotate this notion of gravity.
Cool. Thanks for making that clear for us. Are you cool if we jam on TAM for a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk about TAM.
Why is it important to investors? And for all the founders out there who may be working on a pitch deck, how large is large enough?
First of all, I'm going to shock you that I find this kind of like NRR. To me, I kind of dismiss it in many respects. Yeah. Because for the most part, they're not realistic. They lack credibility in these numbers. I hear these TAMs. We're talking a $30 billion TAM. And then I'm like, okay, that's great. But where did that number come from? The single biggest company that exists already in what you define your category is like a $2 billion company. So where's the other 28?
Where's it hiding?
Where are these numbers coming from? And then you got to unpack it. And then is it software? Is it software services? They're just packing it in. They're packing it in. So this number looks gargantuan. But yet you look at every precedent company and nothing is over, I'm just making it up, $130 billion TAM. We got the biggest company in your space is 2.
Mm-hmm.
So is it that fragmented? What's going on here? So the numbers don't add up. And then it's very simple. Often companies will tell me, well, if we just took the Fortune 2000 and we multiplied by $1 million per, and when we take 20% of that, it's like large numbers times small percentages, you get big numbers. And conceptually, you say, oh, this times that times this equals this. Here's the TAM. Again, that doesn't match up with reality. And then finally, another one is, I'm going to give you an example, like business intelligence. Oh, it's a $40 billion TAM. And all these companies coming into the business intelligence market. It could be a database market. It could be any of these markets. I'm just using that as an example. We got this $50 billion TAM. And then I go through this math. I'm like, well, the biggest company I see is 2 billion, 3 billion. Where is this money? And then you say, the TAM is this big. And then you say, well, so how big are you? Well, we're $100 million, $200 million. And then I say, okay, so are you going to rip and replace the $40 billion TAM? Oh, no. Well, no. 90% of our business is net new. It's something else. We're not ripping and replacing this stuff. Okay, then wait, hold on. You're not ripping and replacing. So you're building an adjacency or building on top of this thing. So that's not your TAM. Your TAM is not the $40 billion thing that you're not replacing and ripping. You're trying to build something on top because, a rip and replace is hard to do.
Yeah.
So what you've done, it's like you've taken the accreditation of this massive pool of spend that you're not really going after right away.
Wow, yeah.
You are adjacent to it, but you claim that's your TAM.
You took credit for it, but you're not going after it.
Exactly. So we're only going after really $1 billion thing that can grow to be 4 or 5 billion. In the 10 years time, we will then replace the 30 or $40 billion old thing. But like you notice that a lot of these companies, they don't rip and replace. Some do, some absolutely do. A lot do not, but yet they take credit for it. So to me, this whole TAM idea, especially for things that are pre-existing,
right?
I just completely discount it. Now, something that's relatively brand net new, this is a harder calculus. But again, you run into the same problem. Big numbers times small percentages often equal big numbers. There's 1 billion people in the world. If we can only get 10% of them, and we'd have this $30 billion TAM, and therefore this is our TAM. And I'm like, okay, wow, really? It is a little trickier to calculate brand new markets. That said, in the last decade of software, how many brand net new markets have there been? And you go through the list, it's not that many. A lot of them are existing markets or it's somewhat extensions of a market. And then there's another whole thing about the TAM, right? It's often you think a TAM is a very narrow thing. And this goes to the concept of features versus companies.
Say more about that.
I'll use this as an example, observability. 10 years ago, there was no such thing as observability. It was SIM, logging, APM, infrastructure management, tracing, browser isolation, whatever. There are 5, 6 discrete categories. And then all these companies, all of these things were their individual swim lanes. And we're going to build these amazing companies in individual swim lanes. 10 years later, it's called one category, observability. So the TAM, what was the TAM? Well, we had all these individual TAM, but this TAM has been like commingled and it's coalesced in a very different thing. And the competitive set is very different, radically different. In general, what I say is companies come in and tell me, I got this massive TAM. I immediately zone out. And then I say, let's deconstruct this. What are you really saying? And then once you deconstruct the truth, then you realize that's not the real TAM.
That was a soundbite. Clip that, producer Natalie. That was good. Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Well, you know what I always say, maintaining compliance is never complete, which is why most security and IT teams feel like they're always in audit purgatory. I'm there right now. But there's a solution, and it's easier than you think. Escape the infinite loop by using ThoroPass's compliance and audit solution. ThoroPass is the only solution using AI-infused technology and in-house auditors to take your team from start to stamp without leaving the platform. As a winner of multiple G2 awards, including top awards for usability and service, your team is in good hands with ThoroPass. From onboarding with dedicated experts to audits from in-house auditors who know every aspect of your framework needs, you can have complete confidence in your ThoroPass compliance journey. ThoroPass is the only solution to offer audits for your most needed security frameworks. I'm talking HIPAA to HITRUST and SOC 2 to ISO 27001. Woo! If you need PCI, DSS, pen tests, or any other major compliance framework, ThoroPass can hook you up. With ThoroughPass, you never need to worry again. Relax, we fix audits. Find more at thoroughpass.com. That's THOROPASS.com. Tell them your boy CJ sent you. They'll hook you up. Boom. How do you size up, though, if a company has the right to own an expansion opportunity? Because I'm guessing that a lot of the companies you do invest in, they have one maybe control point or they're in one of these areas. How do you look and say, how do you make this bigger and expand over time?
I love your point there. Exactly. Who has the power? Who has the leverage? Who has control, right? Let's go back to this observability thing. Which of these 6 or 7 categories has the most gravity, that has the most control? Maybe it was logging, maybe it was APM. I'm just going to use that as an example. And it probably wasn't browser isolation or SIM, or for example. Okay. If you are now in this position of logging, let's say, or whatever, and that for whatever reason has the most gravity, or in a world like a database, like a SQL database, or then you, because you have this gravity,
they don't all have the same pull. So it depends where you start from.
Because you had a stronger position in which to extend into. If you're like in this fringe thing, it's harder for you to extend into something else that is more difficult to extend into. These are judgments, right? These are obviously judgments. You're trying to make a guess of like, oh yeah, that system of record is a great foundation in which to extend. Or are you just a thin veneer, a wrapper? Are you a subsidiary function and you're trying to extend into? That's harder. So these are again value judgments you're trying to ascertain as to who has this, what you said, control point in which to extend. Is it the right, or is it that you've earned the right? You've earned the position to extend versus just having the right to extend, because your actual competitive position is not as strong as you might think.
I love how you use thin wrapper and veneer to describe if you're really in a position to extend, because there are a lot of companies out there that dress themselves up as the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah. In the world of AI, is even more of a conversation, because are you a wrapper on an LLM?
Yeah.
And then you notice that the bottom of the stack is where the gravity goes. It's like gravitational pull. The data, the gravity, the compute is at the bottom of the stack, right?
Yeah, that works.
It goes there. That thing is harder to dislodge. But at the top of the stack, where you're floating in free space, where is this notion of the wrapper? So yeah, I mean, physics does hold.
That's a cool line. Physics does hold. Tony, during the COVID years, we had touched upon how like a lot of companies had super high NRRs. We did see some super premium valuations, both in public and private markets. Can you think of any examples where the valuation just didn't make sense specifically because of TAM, or did you throw out TAM at that point too? You weren't really looking at it.
Let's go to the height of the insanity, 2021. I think interest rates are 0 to 1% post-COVID. The heroin injected capital, rates at 0. Everyone's NRR was 150. SaaS could do no wrong. FOMO, right? And so if you're not investing in these companies, you're missing out on a 100% move in NASDAQ. So either you're in the game, you're not in the game. And obviously, there's degrees in which you could participate. And unfortunately, if you are a participant, you will be caught in the crossfire of that. Again, I go back and we were habituated for 10 years. What I call the golden age of tech is post-financial 2009 to 2019, or let's call it 21, 12 years. 12-year period was the golden age of tech, where you had this just incredible rise of capital availability and rates. And what we've failed to recognize, I think, is that we were lax on what the intrinsic risk was. Because rates were low, risk-free rates were low, the beta, or the risk, or the discount rate, the hurdle rate that we ascribe, it was just, in my opinion, we all habituated to something that this was the new reality. And because we were habituated to this, we effectively put lower and lower discount, the hurdle rates of risk, accredited to a lot of companies. And so I'll give you a great example. In 2021, if I ask you, CJ, what do you think an appropriate discount rate of Apple should be? Microsoft, Google. You'd probably say 10% today.
Something between 8 and 12, yeah.
8 to 12. I mean, back then, when rates were 0, you'd probably say 7 or 8.
I'd probably go as low as 5.
Yeah. So back then, you're saying the discount rate was 7 and 8. 7 or 8. You should at least get, if you're going to own these kind of amazing companies that have bulletproof balance sheets, da, 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 da. And then what was happening is, okay, we have SaaS company X, fintech company Y, e-commerce media Z, and we're losing money. We're going 50, 60, 70%. NRR is 150. We're losing a crap ton of money. And then you say, what are you plugging in of your hurdle rate, your discount rate? Oh, well, 8, 9, 10.
You gave me the same one as Microsoft instead of like 20%.
And actually, you saw that. You saw these models and DCFs and valuations that basically were ascribing a similar hurdle rate for a loss-making, high-growth new company versus something. But then you fast forward to today and you ask the same very question. The CJ family, I always say, forget all of that mathematics and say the CJ family fortune. You could put your entire family fortune for you, your wife, and your kids, and your parents, and you could either stick it in Apple and Microsoft and Google and get 10%. That's the hurdle rate. Would you then put that in loss-making software company Y at the same time? No, you would probably command a 20, 30, 40% IRR. And that kind of comparative analysis was not done in 2020, 2021. Everything was the same. But the discount rate, what you need to achieve that hurdle, to take the CJ family fortune and parking it into something that is safe, steady, and amazing, you got to deliver a lot more, and I better deliver a lot more return for this kind of risk. That was thrown out the window. And then we had to come to Jesus in 2022 and then partly into 2023.
That was a good timeline. And I like how you went through the sentiments of what people were feeling at the time, because there are two things. It's the facts of what the numbers were, but it's also how did you feel? Did you want to be a player in the game? Did you want to be a participant, or did you want to sit on the sideline? And there is an implicit cost in that as well.
There is. Yeah, absolutely there is. And so if you are a participant, you are getting carried away partly with the flood. It's just so reminiscent of 2020. Right?
Yeah.
It's just so many similar attributes to it. Like we had the pets.com loss-making company with vaporware that went to zero. And then we had WorldCom, that was real businesses. Cisco at one point was a great large amount. So there was an infrastructure build because a new platform was being built. And then we had fly-by-night companies. Well, fast forward to 2021, we were going wild on cloud, replatforming the world to cloud and all this big spending, data center, da, da, da. And then we had all of these companies, vaporware with thin veneers and wrappers with loss-making and cheap money fueled. Maybe in retrospect, theoretically worse quality companies, but the conceit was exactly the same. We had two kinds of companies: infrastructure, rebuild companies, and fly-by-night loss-making entities, and same thing. And we had all that whole crypto thing, right?
Which era did you think probably had the worst quality companies?
There were far fewer. I mean, it's probably worse back then.
Okay.
In a way, but it's not like we had so many poor quality companies now. CJ, I don't know if you guys know the math here. And I mean, I'm sure your audience knows the math. How many unicorns are there in the world today?
Aren't there over 1,000?
Yeah, there's over 1,000, 1,400. Who knows? Globally. Half of those are
And like 400
US.
of them, I think, over 5 billion, something like that.
How many public unicorns are there in tech?
Like 70?
No, there's 1,000.
Oh, I'm way off. Okay.
Yeah, that's globally, including Asia, Europe.
Okay.
1,000 and 1,400. So there's actually more unicorns that are private than public. Okay. So on average, and in an average year, which is not in 22, not in 23, and definitely not in 21, you either had 0 IPOs or you had 300 IPOs, right? The average is usually 30, 40, 50.
Why is that? Is that the most that the market can consume and digest?
Okay, yeah, exactly. It's like having turkey at Thanksgiving. You have turkey once or twice a year. Imagine if you had to have turkey every day. That's like the IPO calendar. Historically, there's been 30, 40, 50 global IPOs in tech a year. And then we had this crazy aberration in 2021. And then we had a crazy aberration last 2 years where there literally been none. But in average, it's 30, 40, 50 because you just the market can't consume that. But we have 1,400, which is like 30 years of inventory. So it's just mathematically not going to clear out. So we have a problem now. We have this gigantic backlog of unicorns. the public market can't absorb it. We can't eat turkey every day
Yeah, we'll get
for the
sick.
next 365 days. There has to be some kind of rationalization. Some number can make it, some and a lot cannot, and then they got to figure out a solution for those that cannot.
And you don't think a lot of them will just continue to stay private longer now that we have the
Sure.
proliferation of the LMNOP rounds? I think Databricks ran out of letters.
And I've said this before, in my opinion, the top 10% are world-class and could make it, could go public. The bottom 10 or 20% probably don't exist. And then there's the stuff in the middle. And then the stuff in the middle, like you say, can you just stay private forever? Yeah, that's called being a zombie. Okay. But you have LPs, you have investors, you have employees. They need liquidity at some point. And so then you got to figure out what to do. Some portion of those will try to go public at, in my opinion, valuations that probably will not be palpable for a lot of the investors and employees. And then others will need to be acquired, merged, et cetera, because it's just the market cannot absorb all of those companies, and nor should they. They probably are not unique enough or good enough to withstand to go public. So I think there's going to be a rationalization of this pool. And the investment dollars that have gone in have come down significantly as well. This is all a forcing function that will play out in the next couple of years.
Do you think the bar to go public has changed at all? Or do you think that we just forgot what it was and we're slipping under it for a while?
Well, I think I've heard these complaints like, oh, in the good old days, we can go IPO at 50 million ARR, 100 million revenue.
Yeah, 100 million used to, in trailing 12-month revenue used to be the standard.
But there's something called the world, right? The S&P and NASDAQ have gone up 4 or 5x in market cap in the same period. And now you have companies worth trillions of dollars. So what we thought was large is no longer large. What was large cap? Well, we have companies that are what I call ultra cap now, like $1 trillion, half
$2
$1 trillion entities. And then, you cannot get the attention of investors when you're small. Before, small cap was $1 billion. I think small cap now is 5 to 10 billion because, the pools have gotten bigger, the market caps have gotten bigger, the companies have gotten bigger. Well, the same rules apply. We just can't live with the same old rules. You will never get the attention, if you don't have enough scale. And this goes to the same idea of gravity, of duration, of durability. You're a $100 million company, but everybody else is in the billions.
I never thought about it in terms of getting attention. That's such a neat lens to look at it through, because if people aren't paying attention to you, that dog doesn't hunt.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a $3 billion company.
Which used to be very big.
Yeah, and if you even own 5% of the company, it's $150 million. 10% is 300. Okay, for many investors, like that company is just not. You can't even own it. Plus the trading volume, it would take you 3 months to acquire a position, and then you can't sell the liquidity, and doesn't move the needle on many. And then you have this whole passive complex, right? And so therefore you don't get the attention, because is it worth the effort to invest in a $3 billion company that can't even beat these mega cap, ultra cap companies? And so then what's the point? Why bother? Unless this has the scepter to become one of these breakout companies, which goes again to this notion of durability. I would look at it in a different way. Can you win and dominate? Not so much durability. If I hear that again from a software investor, software company, oh, we're very durable because we're SaaS, I'm just going to, my eyes glaze over when I hear that, because that's not a defining characteristic anymore.
Would you say competitive moats are a defining characteristic?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a power law. If you look at any of these categories, and I'm looking at something in front of me here, if I look at all the different enterprise applications, or security, or simulation and design, or database, data management, whatever your category is, legal software, SMB software, there's a power law. And you'll notice that in pretty much every one of these categories, 3 companies typically dominate 60, 70, 80% of the market cap.
Yeah.
You got to dominate whatever category you're in. You could be the most obscure vertical niche category. That's fine. You just got to absolutely dominate, and you got to win. Number 1 gets all the attention, the credit, the valuation, everything. Number 2, by the time you hit number 3, it's like, why bother? And then that also feeds upon itself this notion of these moats. So if you can have an amazing moat and a relatively, like let's say you're in government ERP software
Okay.
and you dominate government ERP, and you can make a great business. That's why like you're still seeing vertical software companies come out, but these horizontal categories, very far and few between in net new companies are going to dominate horizontal. Because again, this goes to the notion of dominance and moats. Like moat dominance to me, same thing. That's why I love simulation, EDA companies. Like two companies dominate all of EDA, which is electronic design automation. Two companies dominate all the software that is to build every chip on earth, right? That's an amazing position to be in.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want these kind of modes. Oh, and by the way, these kind of categories, I just mentioned simulation and things like that, semi-design software, no one's funding the new competitor.
What's their moat though? So they dominate, but what's their moat that got them there?
I think time, complexity, and let's just say you're not in the limelight. So what do I mean by that? Most software investors, until recently, never cared about chips. That's a commodity. All that stuff's a commodity. And now we've hit this golden age where everything in AI and software is blurred together. Compute and AI is now synonymous. And so venture and private equity or whomever, no one was funding chip companies. And surely, by God, no one was funding math and physics solvers and simulation chip design software companies, because that's obscure and obtuse. Hey, I would much rather fund a marketing SaaS company. And so what happened was you had 500 marketing automation companies get funded and 0 new chip design companies get funded.
Mm-hmm.
But they were like maybe 5 or 6 of them. And then over the last 20 years, they consolidated. Now, and there's only 2 left, 2 really big ones left. Oh, and by the way, because of all that time, and then it's so complicated. And because it's so complicated and no one was funding it, no one was paying any attention, you establish dominance. And then every company on earth uses those tools. That's called gravity. That's called durability.
Right.
And then no one is going to swap you out for the next hot little tool, because there are no new hot little tools and it's too late. Versus, let's chase the hot thing. Let's fund a 500 marketing automation SaaS companies and let the blood run in the streets, and let's see ultimately who will survive. And that was called Salesforce and Adobe. And then everything else, there was blood in the water, blood in the streets, and they could never scale. They don't have the durability. They don't have that moat. Sometimes you're operating in a world over here that no one's paying attention to. It's really hard, really complicated, and no one's funding your competitors, and you ultimately develop a moat. And lo and behold, like, wow, that's a damn good moat. That's happened in software in vertical. Like I just brought up the government ERP. Who's funding and attacking that thing? Yeah, it's a boring thing. I don't want to do that. But that's how one develops these moats, because no one's attacking you. No one's doing it. And 20 years later, you've established dominance. And it's like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to change.
Yeah. You see it like in the auto industry. You wake up one day and CCC and CDK own everything in the space.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Do most of the companies you invest in, Tony, have a competitive moat at the start, or are you making a bet that they'll develop one over time?
It's a combination of both, right? So obviously there are those well-established moats, and I'm all in on that. I love that. I love dominant companies.
Mm-hmm.
Just absolutely, if not number one, a duopoly. Okay, like you just got to dominate where you are 3, 4, 5 times bigger than your second number. Those companies, whatever they could be, awesome. I'm all in. But then you're also like trying to bet on the new thing, right? So a new company, a new category.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to dominate that new category. So those are the new ones that you're betting on. But then they come with, let's say, there's an evaluation period. You're evaluating. Can they make it? Can they not make it? And so you watch year after year. Some blitz all the way through. Some falter and hit the wall. And what you thought was category killer, moat, all these amazing dynamics, they falter, they hit the wall, and they can't get through the wall. And then at that point, you got to make a decision. Like you stick with it or you move. Like increasingly, as I got older, life's too short. You got to move on. Life's too short. You got to move on because, you're just not going to achieve that level of dominance. This is what I call the evaluation phase of these newer companies. I'm always looking for that. But if you're not achieving that breakout dominance, then, life moves on. There's something else. There's something else coming.
What's the timeline for that?
Great question. It could vary between 1 to 3 years. You watch ServiceNow and you see how they've evolved, or like Zscaler, how they've emerged as this leader in SASE, or other examples where what you thought was good and then they hit the wall and then they ultimately end up selling. It's probably no secret, like, you're watching Slack, right, take off, and wow, this is the amazing chat product. And you're watching and you're like, well, here along comes Microsoft Teams. And then you talk to big enterprise and like, well, no, we're just going to take Microsoft's tool.
It's free.
This is not enterprise class, whatever. And, invariably they sold to Salesforce. So this goes to, again, your first questions around durability, moats and stuff like that. And there's time. You can scale to a certain point and then you hit the wall sometimes.
Right.
And then this is why it's so important to have second, third acts. You got to have multiple acts above and beyond your core business. Because what you think it can get you to, and again, put the TAM math out of the window. You know how many companies get to $1 billion of revenue, and then $5 billion of revenue, and then $10 billion of revenue? It is an increasingly shrinking number. Like you have 100 goes to 50, 50 goes to 10, 10 goes to 5. And if you don't have second or third acts lined up, because that to me is a warning sign of which you're just living on the business of the today, not building for the second act, especially on an IPO situation. You better have started second act 2, because, if you've got to be very realistic here, and you got to say, listen, we have a 5-year runway here. So therefore, we better get act 2 going now so that in year 4 or 5, this starts to manifest and become something. And so if you're not thinking like that, you're just going off on the laurels of your initial IPO, like, hey, the TAM is X because it's so massive, because that's how I calculated it using my large number, small percentage theory. But in reality, if you're really, really intellectually honest and first principles approach, thinking like, listen, we have a 5-year runway. We better have Act 2 starting to get lined up. We don't have to talk about it, but we better have something, because eventually you'll hit the wall.
Act 2 is different than second product, right?
Yeah. I mean, unless your second product just really, really could double the company again, because, as you get billed, it's not just, you got to add a lot of net new incremental dollars. And so maybe that second product, you could maybe have a second product that literally would double the company. But if it's just add-ons and extensions, that's not a second act. What happens is you start to saturate. Well, you invariably, you'll find out is that we have a $30 billion TAM, and then pretty much companies hit the wall at 500 or $1 billion and say, wow, man, it's really hard. It's hard to grow because your TAM, you've miscalculated the TAM completely, and you don't have a second act or whatever. Your product is not, and you have not achieved this dominance, and these things. I think there's a sense of reality. I mean, you got to have ambition, you got to dream, and you got to be creative and all these things. But you also have to be rooted in what I call, just principles. And are these principles, are they real? So, yeah, that's what I think.
Do you think that market leaders ultimately need to create a new category?
They could buy. Invariably, they buy, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to really create something that new. I mean, look, Google bought YouTube. They bought Android. Meta bought Instagram. CrowdStrike has bought companies. Palo Alto has bought a lot of companies. They didn't invent cloud security. So yes, once in a while you can create a second act. Apple has had multiple acts, right? Mac, iPod, iPhone. These are like amazing net new creations. But it's very rare to have second, 2, 3 act. Microsoft Azure, you could call that a second act. I think that's the rare case. I think a lot of times you could just buy it or tuck in, like in security space. Palo Alto's, I think, just done a masterful job of creating a second act beyond the firewall.
What's the importance of having a strategic narrative you tell people as a company? I've admired the way that you deconstruct stories that people will tell you about their company, but I feel like you do appreciate that there is some merit in having a strategic narrative and being able to describe that
absolutely.
second act.
You have to, I think. Again, this goes to you got to get the attention of people. Do you matter? Does it matter? Does it not matter? Is it just a metric, an ARR and a growth rate? And the rule of 40 math that anyone can do, like this is third grade math. Okay. What I just did, that's third grade math. ARR is 4 times quarterly revenue, and NRR is an abstraction of EV to revenue. It's just third grade math. Okay. So if you got to go beyond that and say, okay, especially for a newer company, we have a right to exist. I think you used the right to expand, and we have a right to exist because we are in this new category. We will dominate. Trust me, we can do this. And it's worthy of your attention to pay attention to me because we have the potential to be something different and special. If you're just throwing numbers out there, and then it's got to be relevant, right? Oh, I'm a feature masquerading as a company that will be ultimately subsumed, in the inevitable consolidation. That's not really that interesting. Okay. I am going to be whatever XYZ feature set in the observability wars versus I'm going to win the observability wars. It's very different. And so you absolutely need to have that strategic narrative. Otherwise, you just become less relevant. You don't become relevant.
So we've talked a lot about tech and software, but I do want to bring it back to the people who are running those companies. And so the first thing that I wanted to ask you is when you listen to CEOs and CFOs on public earnings calls, other than the actual numbers, what are you listening for?
Yeah. Okay. So, I always say every person, every company, on a conference call is 1 hour, 60 minutes, right? And in the 60 minutes, besides the SEC quarterly GAAP accounting papers, the sheer numbers of it all, the rest of what you say is a choice. You choose what to say, how to say it. And the choices often come in literally what you say or what you write. And you can send a message. You are intrinsically sending a message. So there's a gobbledygook of a 1 hour call. And I really hate this, like the 20 minutes of prepared remarks that you're just reading off of you could just put that in a 3-page letter where you can also convey in written text what you meant. And then what you say in Q&A and these things, what you say often belies what you're thinking. And so I often say whatever one chooses to say is a message, and there's 100 sentences, but 5 or 6 of those sentences mean everything. The other 95 are just filler. And so I look for intent, causality, messages by what they say, and often what they repeatedly say, because that kind of tells you what they're focused on. And so it's very careful to look at what the words they are actually saying, and that what I deem to have relevance and potency. And that's what I look for more than anything in a conference call. That is what the company is really trying to say. This is the focus of the CEO. The CFO has been distracted, but when it came to this topic, that's what, and that gets repeated. And so that's what I'm looking for. The rest, AI can just summarize the conference call, right? This is what happened. So I'm looking for those messages.
All right, last question I got for you, and it's admittedly a selfish one. So I'm a tech CFO, and you've had to listen to a lot of CFOs at tech companies talk on earnings calls or when they pitch you. What do you think are the qualities that separate the good CFOs from the great CFOs?
At the end of the day, what's one of the underlying attributes is trust. I trust in the form of, okay, I feel this is a safe pair of hands. They're not going to cook the books.
Mm-hmm.
They're very clear and concise. They can handle the costs. And it's trust. Do you trust the person that has the wheel of the financial engine? So there's trust, and there's command of the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Command, and you could just tell when people know the numbers, know the facts, and all the different intricacies. That also helps inform trust, right? And then thirdly, I think you brought up this notion of strategic narrative and things. If the CFO can also articulate these numbers, the context of the strategic underpinnings of the business, what really moves the needle, what matters to the company. So it's the trust, it's the command of the detail, and then this strategic narrative, strategic understanding, this holistic combination. Oftentimes you'll have CFOs that can do 1 or 2 of those things.
Yeah.
But if you can do all 3, then you got someone special.
There you have it. The 3 pillars. Tony, that was amazing. Thank you for being generous with your time.
CJ, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Roll the credits, producer Natalie. Run the Numbers is part of the Turpentine Podcast Network. It is produced by Natalie Torren and edited by Justin Golden. Album artwork by Some AI Thing. Yelling and intro by Fat Joe. If you made it this far, please give us 5 stars. I really need this.